Keith Tebow, FRC Media, thank you for joining us again on this Monday. We are speaking with all 11 candidates running for the 4th Massachusetts Congressional District seat, which will be vacated by Joe Kennedy. One of those 11 will hopefully be succeeding Congressman Kennedy in that seat. We've been speaking to candidates right along, and we're pleased to be joined by another one right now, Ben Sigel, who is one of the 9 Democrats running in the race. Ben, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much, Keith. Good to see you. Good to hear from you, and a happy afternoon.
Yeah, same to you. Unfortunately, not in person, but that's okay. Hopefully, we'll be able to share your views with the voters of Fall River nonetheless. Let me just start with, a lot of people may not know who you are and your background. Give us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to run for Congress.
No, I think that's the perfect question. I think that's what people are really interested in, which is, look, like so many others, I was sick and tired of the divisions we were seeing in this country, being tired of seeing us divided by race and income and where we live, who we love, and our abilities. I also was sick and tired of seeing the gap that we were seeing between those that have and those that have not. That was widening. And so although I was the 7th candidate to jump in, I didn't see any of the other candidates talking about how do we all come together as one community? How can we be stronger as one community? Because I truly believe we are far stronger when we are united than when we are divided. And that's the entire theme of our campaign. We, the 4th, that all 34 cities and towns, including Fall River, are all around the table. It's about all of us coming together. And I believe that the foundation for any strong community is access to opportunities. I think it's what binds us all. Whether you're in the wealthiest part of the district or you're the most vulnerable, it's universal access to high quality, affordable healthcare. It's access to high quality, affordable education from preschool all the way up through higher education and adult education. It's access to affordable housing and transportation. And it's also the ability to not have to live in fear and not have to live alone, which is really important. So that includes comprehensive and compassionate immigration reform. And it also includes, and I am the only candidate from day one talking about this, and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but that's combating hatred, bigotry, racism, and anti-Semitism in all forms against all people. I'm not just talking about it now because it's convenient. It's been part of my platform from day one. Now look, in order to solve all these issues I just mentioned, you need a leader who's a bridge builder, a unifier, a connector. You need a leader who doesn't just talk about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, but actually does it. And you need a leader that understands the majority of the perspectives in the district. Let me just tell you for a couple minutes why I believe I'm that leader and that person. I'm Latino. My mom was born and raised in Puerto Rico. 7th generation she's been in Puerto Rico, her family. I would be the first Latino ever elected to Congress from Massachusetts. Now, my dad, he was 3rd generation from Worcester, but he also worked for HUD for almost 20 years, overseeing and auditing the public housing authorities actually in Fall River and in Taunton. And I used to go with him as a kid. My connections throughout this district have been very deep for a while. My cousins all grew up in Sharon and Medway. My brother lives in Franklin. My kids went to school in Newton for a while, and now they're in Brookline. I've had deep connections throughout this district, but I also grew up in a blue-collar, middle-class family in Braintree, a town so similar to the majority of this district. Understanding those perspectives and what people are going through has been really important. I have 4 kids, young kids that I'm raising, having that ability to understand that. Now look, right after college, I worked at the DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and then the Democratic Caucus, helping to promote a Democratic national agenda. I then have been a personal attorney and a private attorney for the last 15 plus years, working at large national law firms, where I've helped to deepen and expand our client relationships as the National Director of All Client and Community Service, and helping to break down silos for better collaboration. During this time, the last 2 years, I've been the president of the Hispanic National Bar Association. Now, one of the things that's really important is I have loved being an attorney. It's intellectually stimulating, but what really helped put me to sleep at night was the over a dozen nonprofit boards that I've sat on in committees in the last 10 years. I did that because I wanted to strengthen our communities. and I wanted to build partnerships. I created the first Jewish Latino national task force for young adults, the first Jewish Muslim national task force for young adults. These are big issues, and I created the first time in the entire country the Young Jewish Leaders Council.
Yeah. I want to get into a lot of issues in the short time that we have. So, there's a lot of issues. You touched on a number of them in your opening, and we're going to be touching, a little more in depth as we go forward over the next 20 minutes or so. But is there one issue, Ben, that when you go to Congress, this is the one issue that you're extremely passionate about?
Well, there's no doubt. Look, we need leaders now more than ever that are diverse and that bring the diverse perspectives of their community and understand that. So when we're looking at what's the key issue now, we see this issue of eradicating racism in our country as the number one issue now, because it's connected to all the other things. It's connected to our housing system, our health care that you heard me talk about it before, our transportation system. It's connected to our education system. And it's not just racism, it's bigotry and hatred against all groups, because I truly believe that hatred against any one group is hatred against all. But look, one of the first things that I would do if elected to Congress is going to be making sure we pass paid family and medical leave. We can't be the only country, industrialized country in the world that doesn't have that. And my wife with 4 kids, for 2 of them, worked in the federal government, and she didn't get 1 day of paid leave. We've seen this under COVID-19. We know that our Black and brown communities are contracting COVID-19 more. They're getting tested less and treated less. And we know that we don't have paid family and medical leave right now, so they can stay at home and not spread COVID-19 and also still put food on the table. I think this is going to be the most important issue, but I do think it's connected to our healthcare and education issues as well. And I'm happy to talk to you about that as well.
You mentioned the aspect of respect for all Americans and the issues we have seen the issues crop up around the killing of George Floyd and the police brutality allegations that have been lodged against police across the country. What are your thoughts in terms of any reforms that should be happening in public safety? And I guess the question I would have for you is, are you in favor of defunding the police, at least the way it's been portrayed?
No, thank you. It's a great question. I actually put out a whole roadmap on how we can eliminate racism in this. Look, I have been to almost 20 marches, rallies, and protests in over 11 of the different cities and towns throughout the district. And Keith, if I just digress for 1 second, that's a big part of who I am, trying to be the people's candidate here. When I am the first and only candidate who's visited all 34 cities and towns in this district. And I started that tour in Fall River at Almax, and I was one of the speakers at the Fall River rally. So look, my plan to eradicate racism is threefold. Number one, we have to condemn and we have to eliminate racial profiling, police brutality, and excessive force. We need to create national certifications for our police, and training for our police, and decertifications. We have to eliminate police qualified immunity, because if a police officer steps over the line or holds a department and violates someone's civil rights, we need to hold them accountable. We need to eliminate facial recognition technology. We need body cams on our police officers. We need to demilitarize our police. And yes, we need to defund police. But what that means is just making a reallocation of some of the resources. We don't need to be paying police officers overtime to be construction flaggers. We also know that education and engagement are the antidotes to criminal justice reform, mental health issues, substance use disorder. So let's reallocate some of the resources to experts in those areas, community crisis teams, social workers, youth counselors. We don't necessarily need the police to be on the front lines on that every single time. Now, look, if we did all that, that would be amazing, and I hope we do, but we're still not getting to the underlying issues of racism, and I want to hit the second layer, which is we got to eradicate it first in healthcare, right? We already talked about, we know Black and brown communities are contracting at double the rate, and we know they're getting tested less and treated less, but they're also getting less PPE. Now, in our education system, we need to do the same. We know right now under COVID, 10% of the students in Massachusetts, K through 12, don't have internet. and 20% don't have a device. So the education inequality gap is growing. We also have to diversify our teachers. We know in Massachusetts, 20% of K through 12 kids are Latino, but only 3% of our teachers are. So we need role models and we need leaders who look like our kids, who understand our kids. Now, look, if we did all that, and including the transportation system and affordable, we're still not getting to 3 underlining reasons for racism here. Number 1, diverse leadership. Political, civic, in our teachers, we need that. Number 2, no one's born a racist, no one's born a bigot, no one's born an anti-Semite. We are teaching that in our society. We need to unteach it and teach at the earliest ages that lies, stereotype, and prejudice can turn into hate. And number 3, voting. We need to support and protect the voting rights of all Americans.
Now, I want to get into some of those other issues as we go along to have you dive a little deeper into some of these issues. The first one I want to talk about is healthcare, and you mentioned that during your last answer. How important is it that everyone is able to afford great healthcare? And let me just ask you, are you in favor of Medicare for all?
So we need everyone to be able to afford it. The goal has got to be universal access to high quality, affordable health care. And I think we come at it right now. We have the ACA. We need to strengthen the ACA. We need to add a public option, and we need to expand Medicare from 65 down to 50. So I think one day we're going to get to Medicare for all, but I think we have a system in place we need to work on right now. And that's because for 3 reasons. Number 1, you can't just flip the switch and Medicare for all system put in place. It's going to take time. And I'm not going to stand by the side while people still don't get coverage and people are dying. That's why I said we need to pass paid family and medical leave immediately. But on the affordability piece, we need to make sure that the federal government can negotiate prescription drug prices under Medicare, because they can't do that now. The second reason right now we can't go to Medicare for all, but we hopefully will one day, is we don't have the votes practically and politically in Congress. You need at least to flip the Senate, and we're trying to do that nationally, but you need the 60 votes. And the final reason for why not Medicare for all right now, but hopefully in the future, is because we need to fully understand the costs and consequences of that system while we're doing, especially in Massachusetts, where we have 98% covered and we have a life science engine to our economy. We need to understand those things. So let's take the ACA as it was initially intended, without Republican governors trying to take it away. Let's add the public option for everyone, and let's expand Medicare.
You mentioned education and how there are a number of students, especially in the K through 12 area, that do not have access to either internet or the hardware, the computers and laptops. How do you propose we fix that?
Well, I think that has to come from the federal government. We have to provide grants and resources to the state, who in turn can provide it to cities and towns so they can give it over to their education pieces. I mean, we've seen, look, in Brookline, where I live right now, we lost pink slipped over 300 teachers several weeks ago. And Taunton, I think, as you know, about 150 teachers. So we need to focus on education. The federal government can help with that. But it actually starts before kindergarten, which is we need universal preschool. Because we know when kids can write and read at the earliest ages, they're going to be more likely to be successful. So it starts there. It adds investments in our teachers and in their salaries and infrastructure. And we want to make sure that kids are breathing clean air and drinking clean water. So that's where we need to focus. But we also have to make higher education affordable and accessible. Look, I still have significant student debt. I know what that's like. And we don't want students trying to decide whether to go to college or not because based on affordability or because they can't have a job afterwards that pays the rent. So we need to cap our student debt at a very low percentage of individuals' income. So maybe somewhere between 5 and 8%. And that students should only be loaning and receiving money at rates that are the same that the banks are. Because right now, students get bank loans between 6 and 11% for their student debt, but banks are loaning each other between 1.2 and 1.6%. Those need to be the same.
What are your thoughts around income inequality? Prior to COVID, A lot of people were working. The economy was moving along well. Unemployment was at record lows. Obviously, COVID, switched that around, but there was still an issue in terms of those who, had most of the money. Were that gap between the haves and the have-nots were still wide. How do you propose we narrow that gap?
No, it's a great question. And I think we need to do it on several issues. Education, we already talked about, is one of those issues that will help narrow the gap. We need to increase the federal minimum wage to at least $15. We need to increase the earned income tax credit. But we also need to help people from an economic mobility standpoint. And that's help them transition from the jobs they have into different jobs in different industries that allow them to make a higher wage. So helping to move people from fossil fuel industries into clean energy industry. We need partnerships between private organizations and companies and our voc ed technical schools and community colleges to help make sure that the kids are learning the skills that they need for 21st century jobs. That's why one of my proposals is for free adult education to help adults move into those type of jobs and transition in a way that helps them live, helps them increase their living wage. But there's a second part to that. And that's we have a lot of undocumented immigrants who actually, and immigrants in general, who have the skills for a lot of the open jobs we have, but don't have the English proficiency. And so we need to put resources towards more English classes that are affordable for these individuals. Steve, I think you know the statistic, but before COVID started, we had 200,000 open jobs in Massachusetts and 130,000 people looking for those jobs. I've already just given you the two main reasons. One, they didn't have the skills, those individuals, so let's give them the skills and training. And number two, they didn't have English as a second language and their proficiency wasn't strong enough. So if we start doing these things, we can really decrease the gap between those that have and have not, including the education piece, but also the skills and training pieces that they need.
What kind of opportunities do you feel are available if the United States continues to move toward making a positive impact toward climate change? And are you in favor of the Green New Deal?
Yeah, so absolutely in favor of the Green New Deal, but it's a theoretical framework, right? So we need to pass legislation underneath it. One of the main pieces has to be creating a new, a clean energy economy that I was talking about before, but making sure we're not leaving people behind. We need to make sure we transition people in there with the right skills and training to a clean energy economy. And we're better in Massachusetts than most states, but we can do so much more. We have to re-enter our global leadership perch and re-enter the Paris Accords. We need to move away from from fossil fuels and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that connects with our transportation, which also connects to economic mobility. Look, we know the South Coast Rail needs to come to Fall River. We finally look like we're on the path, but it's taken way too long. 20% of Fall River doesn't have a vehicle and they need to take public transportation, and we are not getting them efficiently, effectively, and in an affordable way to hubs of employment, which we need to do, because once we start doing that, it will help raise everyone's income level. And that's part of the Green New Deal. We have to connect our transportation, because of greenhouse gas emissions, to our environment and to our housing. We need to create transit-oriented communities around hubs of transportation in Fall River and surrounding areas that is affordable, market rate, standard rate, all mixed together. That's where we're going to see a lifting of everyone, and that's where we'll be able to combat the climate crisis.
A lot of the issues in the campaign like this focus around these domestic issues. However, in Congress, you're going to be asked to weigh in on foreign policy issues as well. How do you feel the country has handled its foreign policy, and how would you make any changes?
Look, I think we've gone completely going the opposite way. We're living not just in a global economy, we're living in a world that's interconnected. COVID-19 is a great example. Had we been more connected with our friends and with other countries out there, we probably could have come up with a better way of responding to COVID-19. This president has removed us from any friends and any deep connections with the rest of the world. We need the rest of the world just like they need us in terms of responding to natural disasters and pandemics and epidemics. We need it for our economy so our companies can grow and can sell their goods across the whole world. We need all that. And from a security standpoint, it's no more important today than ever. We know who our enemies are, and there's some enemies we don't know, and we need to make sure we're staying on top of that so that any battles that are fought are not going to be fought on our soil, but are going to be fought away from here. So we need to look at that all together. So I would really have us building and deepening the friendships and relationships that we had before this president came into power and redoing that again, because we need those friends.
I want to talk a little bit now about the campaign itself. The state legislature last week voted on a final bill, send it to the governor in terms of making it easier for people to vote this fall in the face of COVID-19, which means more mail ballots will probably be made available to voters to participate. What are your thoughts about increasing those opportunities to get people to the ballot box, either by mail ballot or early voting and the like?
Well, look, as I mentioned before, this is one of the ways we eradicate racism, is supporting and protecting the voting rights of all Americans. We need to do that. And here in Massachusetts, that includes being able to have the ability to vote by mail. But we need to eliminate all barriers to voting, all barriers to early entry of voting. We need automatic voter registration here. We need same-day voter registration. We need to eliminate partisan gerrymandering. So anything we can do to get more people, to encourage them to vote, empower them to vote, that means they're more likely to vote for people who are going to represent their perspectives. And we need far more diverse perspectives, as is very evident after the murder of George Floyd and even beforehand. We need more diverse leaders who understand the diverse perspectives of their community who are running. It's one of the reasons why I'm running. As someone from a middle-class blue-collar family that's similar to the majority of the district, as someone who would be the first Latino ever elected to Congress, as someone who's raising 4 kids and understands those perspectives of childcare costs and raising a family. We need those diverse perspectives that are out there representing the community. So I'm all in favor of mail-in voting.
You know, as we move on and we look at the campaign coming up in just a few weeks now, I believe 8 weeks as we record this is the September 1st primary. Another issue that has been brought up by a number of people in terms of their interest is the partisanship we see in Washington. As one of 435 congressmen in the House, how do you bridge that divide? How do you start working together with those on the other side of the aisle?
Look, I think it first starts here, right? In our district, it's why our theme is We the Fourth. We're all in this together. It's why I visited all 34 cities and towns. It's why I will start an advisory board comprised of representatives from all 34 cities and towns, including Fall River, that meet with me 4 to 6 times a year and is very diverse based on age and based on race and income and business, because we need to hear the perspectives of everyone and bring Democrats and Republicans together. And then when we move to DC, it's about building real lasting relationships with both people within the Democratic Party and people that are in the Republican Party. We used to have that. We used to have the McCain and Orrin Hatch and Kennedy days. We know that well, where you can disagree on 80% of the policies, but let's find that 20% we agree on and let's move forward for the American people. It's why I want to pass paid family and medical leave first, because it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's why I want to negotiate prescription drug prices under Medicare, because it affects all constituents. We need to find those things across the aisle, those issues and topics that we all are connected to and our constituents are. When we do that, we can move things forward. It's why Congressman Joe Kennedy has been successful on the opioid crisis and mental health, because these are issues that affect everyone. But you have to build relationships of trust and understanding. You need to do that as a candidate like me with voters, and you need to do that with other of the 434 other members of Congress as well.
You know, as we look at the Democratic primary, there are 9 of you in the race. All 9 of you live in 3 communities. You mentioned you live in Brookline. There are members in Newton and also in Wellesley. the northern part of the district in suburban Boston. Those in Fall River, one of the reasons why we're having you on, Ben, is that people can learn about you because they're going to be voting for you, or one of the 9 in the Democratic primary on September 1st. How do you bridge that disconnect amongst the people, in the northern part where you know a lot of people personally, you've lived there for a while? How do you bridge that disconnect between the northern part and the rest of the district where, none of you hail from?
So this is one of the reasons I jumped into the race. Although I live in Brookline, I grew up in Braintree. I used to visit Fall River and Taunton with my dad when he was overseeing and auditing public housing authorities. I've spent time in the district. I grew up in a family and in a town similar to the southern part. It's why my theme is We the Fourth. It's why I started my whole campaign with visiting Fall River first, and why I've been back several times, and why I was a speaker at the George Floyd march and protest in Fall River. Because I believe you need someone who's going to help bring the voice of those in Fall River to the federal table, not just locally. It's why I want to create an advisory board made up of residents of Fall River and the other 33 cities and towns. No other candidate is talking about it in this way, how we're all interconnected and related, and we're so much stronger when we are doing that. So I actually believe I do understand what the needs are of the people in Fall River, and I'm learning more and more every day because I've been with the people in Fall River, and I've connected with them, and I've spoken with them both in the campaign and beforehand, and because my family has grown up in the central and southern part of this district, in all different parts, like my brother living in Franklin. So I think I am the only candidate that understands those perspectives the best right now, and there's a lot more to learn. But we need to make sure that Fall River has a voice. It hasn't had a voice, I think, in the federal government yet. And we need to make sure it's not one person's voice. It's a whole cadre of people that are intergenerational and diverse. It's all of their voices that are going to come to the table. And as the next member of Congress, I can promise you, I will make sure that Fall River has a seat at that table. Their voice is going to be listened to, and the diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces of the city of Fall River will be part of it.
As we wrap up, Ben, here's an opportunity for you to share with our viewers how people can find out more about your campaign.
Thank you so much. If you like what you heard and you want to find out more, please go to our website at bensiegelforcongress.com, where you will also see that we were the first candidate to put up a COVID-19 resource page, translated into Portuguese and into Spanish. You can also sign up there to be a campaign fellow if you're in high school or college. We have 50 such campaign fellows working on our campaign from throughout the district. And if you want to follow us on social media, please do so at Ben Sigel for Congress on Facebook and at Ben Sigel on Instagram and Twitter.
All right, Ben Sigel, Democratic candidate for the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District, looking to succeed Joe Kennedy in that seat. Thank you for joining us today, Ben. All the best, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much. Please stay safe, and I really enjoyed our time together.
All right, Ben, thank you very much. And we want to thank you very much for joining us on this Monday as we continue to meet the candidates running in the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District. I'm Keith Tebow. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again soon.